The Democrats are getting more and more brazen in their attempts to actually undermine Donald Trump's enforcement of federal immigration law. And of course, it's getting so bad that what we're going to see today is Representative Brandon Gill actually calling out Representative Jayapal and her attempt to intimidate federal law enforcement officers and our military. But before we get into these clips, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe in this video so we can break through the algorithms. Here we go.
This bill gives the Secretary of Homeland Security nearly limitless discretion to label any non-citizen as a terrorist or a gang member and subject non-green card holders to a lightning-fast removal proceeding before not an impartial judge, but before a DHS official. And I was just looking at my phone and saw a story of these mass deportations, rapid deportations that are happening, and a story of somebody in New York, a woman who was illegally deported, and they left her 2-year-old child behind. And this was because she was deported in 4 days. All of the process was essentially waived. That is what this administration is doing. They have falsely accused countless innocent people of being gang members and terrorists, and they are using that label as an excuse to ship them off to torture chambers and even killing them. For any federal agents who are watching this, remember that you swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This conduct that we're seeing does not hold up with that oath, and we are going to hold you accountable. Everyone that is involved in this absolute travesty and violation of justice. This is not normal, and we should be standing up to actually uphold the laws of this country. I urge Republican colleagues to join us and vote no on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The lady yields back. The gentleman from, excuse me, from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remind the committee that administrative removal is already on the books right now. All this law does is simply expand the categories under which an illegal alien can be deportable via administrative removal. In fact, administrative removal was used 13,000 times by President Obama, over 12,000 times under President Biden. Were those deportations a violation of due process?
Would the gentleman yield?
And no, I will not. And if we want to talk about due process, as my colleagues would like to, where was the due process for Rachel Morin, who was slaughtered by an illegal alien? Where was the due process for Kayla Hamilton, who was slaughtered by an illegal alien? What about Laken Riley or Jocelyn Nungary? Where was the due process for them? Where was the outrage when the last administration ushered into our communities Trinidad Aragua gang members, MS-13 cartel members, and terrorists from around the world? I think that the American people can see that Democrats reserve their tears for illegal aliens who break our laws and victimize our communities. But if we want to talk about due process, let's talk about due process. Federal courts of appeals have routinely upheld this law's administrative removal procedures as they have existed for the last 30 years. In fact, every federal court of appeals to consider the constitutionality of the expedited removal procedures under Section 238 of the Immigration and Nationality Act has held that the statute comports with due process. Nearly 3 decades ago, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit held that, quote, clearly the expedited statutory deportation scheme comports with the minimum requirements of due process pronounced by the Supreme Court. The Fifth Circuit outlined the due process requirements, quote, that an alien be provided notice of the charges against him, a hearing before an executive or administrative tribunal, and a fair opportunity to be heard, end quote, all of which this statute satisfies and did satisfy. As recently as this past July, the Fifth Circuit reiterated that holding, as have the U.S. Courts of Appeals for the 4th, 6th, 9th, 10th, and 11th Circuits. Democrats' fear-mongering contradicts the law, contravenes the text of the bill, and undermines efforts to ensure that dangerous illegal aliens can be quickly removed from the United States. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
That is how it's done, right? You have Brandon Gill in full control of the facts, basically going against every single thing that Representative Jayapal is actually saying. And speaking of Jayapal, let's flash back a little bit, because what's the argument she's making? She says, hey, all you military members out there, all you people actually doing these deportations, anyone assisting, all you federal agents, guess what? We are going to hold you accountable because you are responsible for protecting this country from enemies, foreign and domestic, right? How timely is this wording of hers? Because we just had, of course, that group come out and say, hey, military members, you have to fight back against illegal orders. And of course, the subtext of all this is you have to disobey Donald Trump because obviously everything he's doing is totally illegal, even though it is 100% above board. Now, of course, what's in discussion here is the expansion of administrative removals, right? You have basically expedited removals of criminal aliens or people that we know who entered this country illegally. And guess what they're given? Due process. Now, their due process looks different from other people's due process because it doesn't have to be before a judge. It doesn't have to be before witnesses and testimony and all of this stuff. All we have to do is determine, is this person a criminal? And did they come in purposefully illegal? And then guess what? They get their little hearing and then they get removed, right? That is the expedited process. And all this bill is saying is we're going to expand that to basically criminal activity, gang activity, drug dealer activity. But of course, this isn't good enough for Jayapal because obviously whenever we ship these people out, they're being sent someplace to be tortured or even killed, which I can only assume is in reference to El Salvador's mega prisons, where of course they don't treat the prisoners exactly with kid gloves. But all of this, of course, is 100% legal and no one cared a whiff about it until, of course, we ramped it up to the scale that Donald Trump is using. Because yes, even Barack Obama and Joe Biden used administrative removals. The only problem is they allowed in a heck of a lot more people than they were actually getting rid of. But there were even some that were far too dangerous for them to even ignore. All right. But Donald Trump and the new administration, guess what? Every single person who comes into this country illegally, you will be removed. You will receive your due process. It's just going to be the due process that Jayapal doesn't agree with. But guess who does agree with it? Oh, the Supreme Court on several different occasions, as was mentioned by Brandon Gill. But of course, Jayapal is going to try to tug at our heartstrings because you have a mother who was deported back to Guatemala from New York City, and they left the 2-year-old child behind. Well, guess what? The 2-year-old child could go with her, right? The whole point is, if this person comes into the country illegally, they are subject to deportation, and families can be deported together, as Tom Homan famously says, right? We're not trying to separate anyone, but if you come into this country the wrong way, you will, of course, now be subject to our laws. And by the way, the woman being discussed actually was seeking asylum in this nation, but the problem is she's from Guatemala. All right, that's not exactly a country that is being war-torn or ravaged right now. And unfortunately, being from a crap-hole country doesn't mean you're going to qualify for asylum under our legal status. So guess what? You got to go on back to where you're from. All right, but of course, all of this is besides the point. Illegal immigrants are receiving their due process. Donald Trump is not breaking any laws. And guess who did the exact same thing? The former Democrat presidents of this country. So Jayapal can shut her mouth as Brandon Gill, of course, delivers truth to the masses. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and say hi to your mom for me. Do you like t-shirts? Of course you do. And now you can support the channel by buying an Angry Teacher t-shirt designed by me, Angry Teacher. So if you like America, if you like freedom, if you like liberty, then go ahead and click the link in the description where all designs, of course, are 100% mother approved. So enjoy yourself and find something you like today.